welcome back to another episode of Fridays with Flo. And today we're going to be talking about for sale by owner, otherwise known as FSBOs, versus listing with an agent and what you're actually risking. If you're thinking about selling your home on your own, before you do, you might want to actually understand the risks that come with this experience. And from pricing to exposure and negotiations, how that can actually affect your final net proceeds. So stay tuned and let's talk a little bit about it. All right. So there are 5 bigger risks that for sale by owners take when they are preparing to list their homes. And for the last several episodes of this series, we've definitely been talking about the 2026 housing market, including the pricing your home right, what buyers are really focused on and what's working versus what's not working. So definitely take a look at the last several episodes on this segment because there's a lot of really good information here. So the number one risk that for sale by owners take when listing their home on their own versus using a real estate agent is pricing. For sale by owners, we're approaching selling your home from an emotional pricing standpoint. And you're also guessing, right? We're focused on what my neighbor sold the house for. So surely mine is better because I saw those pictures. So mine is definitely going to sell for more. And unfortunately, there are a lot more pieces to the puzzle that you got to take into account when listing and preparing for the home. And it's not just in comparison to your neighbor's house. We're looking at square footage. We're looking at how many bedrooms and bathrooms, functionality, newer systems versus your home, and also how the market shifts very quickly, quicker than you think. If that home sold 3 months ago, it's a quite different season and market today versus 3 months ago. Whether it was the fall, the winter, or spring, where things are a lot more hot and buyer demand is at its peak, whereas you're trying to list it in the fall. And so your home might sit longer on the market if you're trying to price the home based on spring numbers that sold in your neighborhood in comparison to what pricing might really look like in the fall and winter. And so when you overprice it, your home will sit longer in the market. When you underprice it, it could also leave money on the table. So using a real estate agent allows you to really take into account comparable sales values in your neighborhood and making sure that you are not underselling, but you're also not overpricing and wasting time. Think about the monthly mortgage payment that you're making every month. Let's just say that you're paying $2,000 every month in your mortgage payment. And so 3 months sitting on the market is $6,000. And you could have just reduced the price by $5,000 or $4,000, whatever the amount is, and could have spared yourself and gotten the deal closed already. So real estate agents use data and strategy and positioning to get your home sold, not only for the best price, but also in the least amount of time. So kind of consider that if their only concern is paying the realtor commission, you might already be losing out tens of thousands of dollars trying to list it yourself versus paying that real estate agent whatever that commission would have been, right? So the second item that most for sale by owners do not consider is exposure and marketing. Unfortunately, as a for sale by owner, you don't get access to everything that real estate agents get access to. And much of that is going to be something called the MLS, otherwise known as the multiple listing service. This is the platform that syndicates through all real estate websites, including Realtor.com, Zillow, Homes.com, all sorts of platforms, including Redfin, including different brokerages that also get access to this listing. And so the access and the opportunity you get to network and expose your property, you're limited to just listing it on Zillow or, whatever other platforms that allow you to list on without having a real estate license. The MLS is only available to licensed real estate professionals. So you're missing out on that exposure. You're also missing out on the ability for your real estate agent who has access to a large network, hopefully they do have access to a large network, to also branch out and expand the marketing on your home as well. And so if that real estate agent, somebody like myself who's involved with my local chamber of commerce, I'm involved with a variety of local networks. Maybe they're a part of the luxury division within their firm, or they're a part of the commercial division within their firm. And so they get access to all sorts of things that you won't have access to. So that makes a huge difference in your ability to kind of give that exposure and marketing. And then there's also off-market spaces. There's a lot of things that you're paying for when you're paying the realtor that you might not have immediate access to. So using an agent equals maximum exposure and demand creation. It's a lot for you to kind of try to list the home and also host the open houses. Buyers typically, when they're looking at the home, they want to look at it in privacy. You know, they don't necessarily want you to be at the home with them. They don't want to hear your insight. They kind of want to really make an informed decision by themselves with the disclosures that you've disclosed. The third thing that for sale by owners risk is negotiation risk. So buyers and agents, they negotiate for a living. You know, and so essentially, if you're looking at selling your home and by yourself as a for sale by owner, you're going against a licensed real estate professional who does this day in and day out for a living and can really pretty much overhaul you in your net proceeds, because they're coming in and they're going to say, hey, your home is worth this much according to comps, and it might not appraise. And so if it doesn't appraise, then we're certainly going to lose money on the table. Therefore, that they might give you less money in due diligence and earnest money. And if you paid attention to our last several episodes of the listing series, then you might be familiar with the words due diligence and earnest money, which are essentially good faith money that the buyer has to give within 24 hours of the home going under contract, right? So due diligence is given directly to the seller within 24 hours of the accepted, executed contract. And so a real estate agent who's representing the buyer against a for sale by owner might offer no due diligence or earnest money, or very little due diligence or earnest money, which means that at any point in time that the buyer decides they're no longer interested in this home, they get to walk away pretty much without losing much. Whereas if you have an agent representing your side, your agent's going to advise you and say, hey, we're definitely going to require a little bit more upfront. And so I was actually in a scenario where it was not a for sale by owner, but I'm representing the buyers and the listing agent representing her sellers. They were strongly advocating that my buyers offer more due diligence than what we were offering. I think initially we were offering $3,500, and they were requiring us to submit a little bit more, somewhere between $5,000 and $7,500. And so their concern was that we might walk away from the deal, and they didn't think $3,500 is enough. And truly, sometimes when you're dealing with clients who have money and are looking at higher price points, $3,500 is very minimal for them to lose and walk away from the home. And now the seller's left with trying to get it sold again, right? After 2 months of already being under contract, almost to the closing table, now you've got to go back on the market. And God forbid it's a time or season where it's the worst time to go back on the market, where most people are no longer looking anymore. Imagine it's the fall or the winter, and we've got a lot fewer people looking to move. So your home is just going to be sitting through the entire holiday season and putting your plans on hold. Lots of factors that are taken into account here, and things that can really cost you time and money. The negotiation risk is a huge piece of it. The other piece to negotiation is not just what the buyer gives up at the beginning, but also once that home inspection report comes back, you know, being able to go back to the for sale by owner and say, hey, all of these items are wrong. And so how are you as the seller going to approach that? As a for sale by owner, you might not be clear on what you are legally allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. In North Carolina, we are an as-is state. And so that means that the offer to purchase contracts also automatically come as is with the purchase of the home. Now, oftentimes, more often than not, the sellers often work with the buyers and at least make a couple repairs. They definitely will try to work it out. They don't want to lose the deal. They don't want to go back on the market, because if they go back on the market due to inspection things, that inspection report is legally required to be disclosed. Material facts, any findings, including foundation issues, mold, termites, those bigger things are considered material facts. And that is required to be disclosed if you go back on the market. So, you know, if you're a for sale by owner and you do not know the laws and the rules, you can end up getting sued by the buyer if you move forward with a transaction and not properly disclosing about the home. As far as like the buyer home inspection negotiation, if you don't have a real estate agent advocating for you as the seller, you can essentially get your net proceeds even less because you are now forking out extra funds to try to smooth out the deal, try to save the deal, and make sure everything's all right. Now, if you have an agent on your side, they might tell you, hey, you don't have to do all of these things. Maybe we just fix these things and try to work it out. Pretty much, again, negotiating with the buyer agent on your behalf on what's working, what's necessary, what's needed. I remember my very first listing that I put for sale, and I had the buyer agent come at me, and they had the home inspection report, and they delusionally asked us to repair everything on the home inspection. And we were like, absolutely not. Like, where in the world does that ever happen? This is not a new construction home. With new construction homes, typically the builder will fix everything that comes up on the home inspection report. But this is a pre-existing home over 20 years old. You're getting it as it is. And so if there's any specific items you want us to repair, we can do that, but you need to update this list of what you really care about. So they updated the list, and then they asked for seller concessions, otherwise known as a credit. So instead of the seller having to repair these things, they said, hey, we'll take an amount of $5,000. Was it $5,000 or $8,000? And I came back and I said, absolutely not. It's not worth, all of that is not worth $8,000. And so we were already giving you $5,000. We're not giving you another $8,000, you know? And so if my seller did not have me by her side to pretty much tell that buyer agent, and I don't even blame that buyer agent, like, she was doing her job. She was advocating for her buyer to get the best circumstances possible, either everything fixed or an extra $8,000. And we were like, no, absolutely not. So, but the thing is, it's something that I too would do for my buyer, you know? So I would try to get the maximum, the most. So I don't blame her. However, because my seller was represented, I was able to counter a lot of that and say, no, we're not giving you that much because you don't need that much. And so we were able to work things out. And it didn't mean that the deal had to be lost. They were willing to buy the house because we got a pretty substantial due diligence payment from them. So the likelihood that they were going to walk away and lose out on the money that they already gave us up front from due diligence was also quite slim. So sometimes people are just pushing buttons and testing the waters. And if you don't know that and you don't understand that, you can really lose the deal. So your agent protects your price. It protects the terms of the initial offer to purchase. And most importantly, your real estate agent protects your net proceeds of the home. All right. Now, the fourth thing that for sale by owners risk when they're listing their homes is legal and contract risks. This is a huge one. I've kind of mentioned several of the legal risks already, and understanding what your state law requires when the sale of real estate is happening, right? Number one, contracts, disclosures, and timelines. The real estate contract for that state outlines several terms, including due diligence period. That means how long the buyer has to do all of their inspections and what happens after that timeline expires, as well as the disclosures of what the seller discloses about the property. So your real estate agent typically can guide you and tell you, hey, these items, if there's this must be disclosed. We cannot hide anything. That is illegal for us to, if you're aware of something, you're aware of the septic not working, a mold issue, or a water stain issue, those active problems, and you're trying to keep that hidden, that is something that can not only cost you the deal, but it can also cost you to get sued. And so there's some things where even though you're holding it back as the seller, if the realtor knows about it, we must legally disclose that, regardless of you telling me as my client that you do not want me to disclose that. Legally, I have to. And it's to protect not only myself, but per state law, all things that we know about the property must be disclosed. When you're a for sale by owner, if you don't know these things, you're going to lose out not just on deals, but also the legal requirements. So very important stuff to pay attention to, as well as timelines. Understanding the timelines written on there, they're not just a suggestion, right? So if we're supposed to close on the home May 14th, then we certainly want to make sure that we are prepared to close on the home by May 14th. Not, hey, I'm going to be a couple days. If there's going to be a couple days where you're going to be in the home after the home is closed, then filling out that seller possession after closing document to ensure that you have rights to the property after, because once those docs are signed and that buyer owns that property, it's no longer your home. And so you must be out, right? Also allowing the buyer to do their due diligence legally on those purchase contracts. The seller is supposed to allow proper access for the buyer to do their due diligence for all inspections, all sorts of things. You cannot refrain or block the access to the property and those types of things. So there are lots of things there, including the one mistake that most people can make is liability or deal falling apart. So there are a variety of things where the seller is liable to disclose, the seller is liable to hold up to avoid breach of contract. If you've decided to change your mind after signing this purchase contract and fully executing where the buyer has signed and you've signed, that at that point, for any reason that you decide to change your mind, you are now in breach of contract. And so at that point, any money that the buyer has already given is owed back to them. And not only that, the buyer has the right to sue you for not performing, for not closing on the deal as you've signed, especially if they've already spent other money for appraisals, home inspections, chimney inspections, septic and well inspections. You know, those are some things that the buyer's forking up in the cost of the process, and you've shifted to change your mind. The other thing is understanding that delivering a clean title of the property is also a requirement in the offer to purchase. So if we're saying we're selling the property, according to the North Carolina 2T offer purchase contract, you are expected to deliver the home with no cloud and no other heirs or involvement in it. Otherwise, there's other things that's necessary, such as maybe a power of attorney, estate or will, something clear that delivers that you have the right to sell the property solely, or if there's any other heirs or ownership interests, that they are present to also sign off on the property as well, because the buyer is going to have to get title insurance, ensuring that in the future, nobody else is going to come up and say, I have rights to this property. It was sold under me and I didn't know about it, those types of things. So lots of pieces to the puzzle with legally selling a property. And again, if you do not have a real estate agent guiding you and managing these risks, you really are setting yourself up for possibly hundreds of thousands of dollars of expenses when it comes down to paying attorneys, legal ramifications, and those types of things. All right. Now, the final and most important piece of the risks for sale by owners take is net proceeds. And that's just the truth, right? As far as some data, about 91% of sellers use a real estate agent. That's some important facts there. And that's because they understand that having somebody who understands real estate to advocate for them and represent them means a lot to not only their bottom line, such as their net proceeds, but also protecting them in the sale legally. Also, for sale by owner homes, otherwise known as FSBO homes, sell for about 18% less on median, right? A lot of other studies also might show that for sale by owner homes sell for 15 to 26% less on average, depending on your state, depending on your market. That's a huge gap. That's money that you are certainly leaving on the table. A seller might not only just price their home less, but also even if you price your home well and you're set and you're staying firm on it, when that home inspection comes in or other issues come up, that buyer agent is coming at you and demanding that the price be reduced, demanding these items are fixed. You end up spending much more than you would have. So even if you had it right on the first, at the beginning where you was firm on your list price and everything's good, even if you had it all set and you're staying firm on that purchase price, you can still end up netting less at the closing table when other weird issues come up throughout the process, right? Because you're typically under contract for between 30 days and 45 days. That's a lot of room for errors, mistakes, negotiations to happen again. And so if the FSBO median is about $360,000 for the home sale price, an agent assisting you could actually help you sell that home for about $425,000. That's just real number timelines to consider. That's about $65,000 of a difference on your net. So choosing to sell something on your own can pretty much cost you $65,000. Think about that. So if a realtor is saying, hey, my fee is 3% of the sales price, and that 3% of 425,000 would have just been, let's just say, hard math here, $14,000. And so it would have just cost you $14,000 to pay a real estate agent to advocate for you, negotiate for you, protect you legally, and make sure that you successfully, smoothly sell this house. And so I think $14,000 is a lot better than losing $65,000. So, I mean, it depends on the math that you want to do. So, the other piece to understanding that your net proceeds is going to cost you is also that oftentimes those FSBO homes will sell for less or end up giving more concessions. That's just the summary there. So, if they don't get you with the purchase price, they'll get you with the seller concessions that you end up having to give. And so, it's the agent's job to maximize your net, not just your price. All right. So it's not about saving on commission. It's about what you walk away with at the closing table. So hope you guys enjoyed today's session. I'm excited to hear some of your thoughts in the comments about all the things that happen with the world of FSBOs versus using a listing agent. And I'll see you guys next Friday for our next episode, and stay tuned. All right. Have a good one.